Howdy, and welcome to the Allied Airpower podcast, NATO's sole broadcast that patrols the full spectrum of air, space, and cyberspace. I am your host, Jose Houdini Davis, and today we've got a very special episode for y'all on NATO Airpower. It's really a great opportunity for me to catch up with a good friend and a good dude. On the show right now, we have Rob Kunzik, a senior producer with Intrepid TV, a UK-based production company contracted to headquarters NATO Multimedia. How are you doing, Rob?
Doing great, Jose. How are you?
I am peachy. So, Rob, you had this really fun project where you traveled across the Alliance to produce a short documentary on NATO air power. I'm just curious, what was the inspiration for producing this documentary?
Well, at NATO Multimedia, we talk to a general audience, right? I like to tell my interviewees, if your grandmother won't understand what you're saying, our audience won't. So our endeavor is always to break down complex topics into digestible terms and to make kind of the most complicated business, which is the defense of the alliance, into something easily understandable. So I've always been a huge air power nerd since I was a kid. So I figured this was something I could do quite easily that would also give me an excuse to go shoot jets.
Well, yeah, you definitely had a great excuse to go shoot some really cool jets. Where did you all go when you were producing the documentary? It looks like you had some fun discussions with some of the pilots.
It was all kind of located in a relatively small pocket of Western Europe. I shot this during Ramstein Flag 25. The nerve center of that was at Leeuwarden Air Force Base in the Netherlands. So I shot primarily the bulk of the fighter jet footage at Leeuwarden. I also visited European Air Transport Command at Eindhoven, where the MRTT multi-role tankers are based. And I also filmed at AWACS at Geilenkirchen in Western Germany. And finally, I also filmed with the 480th Fighter Squadron for this segment on SEED, or the Wild Weasel mission, and they're based at Spangdahlem Air Base. The conversations with the fighter pilots were often kind of rushed because, you had a pilot and they're like, all right, you've got 20 minutes before this guy's got a step or a training sortie. And
Kind of busy.
they're busy, and they're also kind of chronically prone to embarrassment. Top Gun kind of ruined everything for everyone with a camera, because now pilots are just chronically mortified to be in front of a camera. But once you get them warmed up a little bit, the interview's always fun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of pilots, Leeuwarden was where we first met, and you say it way better than I do. But guess who I'm talking to this afternoon, actually, for the Allied Air Power podcast? I'm talking to Colonel Freeze. Colonel Freeze, remember? He was
great.
featured. He is my favorite Danish person I know.
The funny thing about making these documentaries is you interview these guys for 30 minutes and then you spend the next 2 months of your life staring at their face on your screen. I feel weirdly fond of Colonel Freeze because he gave me so many good sound bites for this documentary. And when you're in the edit, it's stuff like that really saves you, Like he had a really great analogy comparing modern air war to a boxing match. You're on the offense and the defense at the same time. And when he said that, I wanted to hug him, but that would have been awkward.
He's awesome, dude. And exactly to your point, that's why I asked him to come on the show, is because he's so well spoken. And he's so down to earth, and he's just a really nice guy.
Quite a generous for his time.
Yes, for sure. Because I used him for everything when we were out there in Leeuwarden. We were where we first met, and it was great to know and then see you a couple weeks ago. And before I forget, I know I did you a foul because I did not give you a patches. I am so sorry, Rob.
It's fine. We'll see each other again, and
yes,
I'll expect even more patches.
That gives me a perfect excuse to do another project with you. Going back to the short documentary you produced, what was the biggest thing that you learned most about NATO air power during the whole production?
It's funny. I've been doing this job for a minute, and so it's striking when I do learn something new. In this case, I did my very first flight. I did my very first sort of ride along with the AWACS team, and it really is striking because inside the kind of windowless tube of this aircraft, you have about a dozen different NATO nations, and that's kind of rare, surprisingly. In land combat, you've got units dispersed across a training area. When you're covering naval exercises, you have ships dispersed across a wide patch of ocean. If you're lucky, you see one on the horizon. It's rare to see so many different allies in one space work together, speaking the same language, and I guess working towards a common goal. And that was really striking and unique to see, an American controller sitting next to an Italian controller, Belgians and Poles and everybody working together quite seamlessly as kind of like a big family. And I guess it's surprising to me that this late in my career, or, after I've been doing this for so many years, I can sort of sit back and say, wow, that really is interoperability, the dreaded I word that we all, say so often, but so seldom truly understand what it means. Interoperability is a Polish, radar guy sitting next to his Italian counterpart, and both of them speaking the same language and working quite seamlessly because they've done it a dozen times before.
Wow, that's awesome.
AWACS is great too. They feed you while on board.
Oh, do they really?
They do. It's like a quite elaborate box lunch setup. I'm not used to being that pampered, but
oh wow.
And that's not true. That's not true. The EART guys feed you well as well. Highly recommend.
Well, I'm sure you have like a good menu of places where they'll feed you well, because you travel a lot across NATO's area of operations. And happy to grab you for NATO Airpower.
You got my number. And look, if it's not MRE, it qualifies as good food in my book.
Well, thanks for being on the show, Rob, and giving us this great preface to today's episode on the Allied Airpower podcast. And now let's listen to this awesome documentary on how NATO Airpower is securing the skies 24/7, 365.
NATO were attacked. How would Allied air forces defend their territory? It's not just about fighter jets. NATO's air forces rely on a mix of cutting-edge technology, elite training, and most importantly, the kind of teamwork that uses the strengths of 32 allies to secure the skies. What does that mean, really, and why is it important? Well, if NATO ever had to defend its territory, it would first need to establish what commanders call air superiority, complete control of the skies. Only then can ground forces get to work without fearing attack from above. But gaining air superiority is much easier said than done.
Overall, you can see it like a boxing match. We are both in the defensive and in the offensive at the same time. And while we are defending ourselves, we are also doing some, so to speak, punches, where we get together a lot of different types of aircraft with different goals and punch a hole into an enemy's air defense and hit him where it hurts.
If this looks complicated, don't worry, we'll break it down for you. Basically, the key to securing the skies is in seeing what's up there. That's a little hard when there's more than 27 million square kilometers of sky covering NATO airspace. But thanks to an integrated network of radars, we have a pretty good idea of what's up there. In the event of a conflict, however, these radars could be knocked out by strikes, shut down by electronic jamming, or switched off by hackers. That's why NATO puts radars in the sky. Meet the Airborne Warning and Control System, or simply AWACS. It's a flying radar with a crew of 30 that can oversee a patch of airspace roughly the size of Poland. Unlike ground-based radars, which can be blocked by rises and falls in the terrain, AWACS can track everything, flying low or high.
The system we have is able to cover 360 degrees around our platform for more than 500 kilometers and provide the proper information real time on any movements that we see in the air. Mainly we are like an enabler that gives them the possibility to see far normally than they are and earlier than what their own system will allow.
NATO owns a fleet of E-3A AWACS aircraft based in Geilenkirchen, Germany, where they're on call to support NATO exercises and operations. Each is staffed by a multinational crew. On any given mission, more than a half dozen NATO allies are hard at work inside the windowless cabin, peering into radar screens and talking to Allied aircraft on the radio. There's a point to the multinationality.
Having the different countries in the AWACS is giving the advantage that every country, from the smallest up to the biggest, they bring their own experience. This experience, together with the standards we have in NATO, makes us flying and accomplish the mission we get tasked for.
While AWACS watches over the alliance, it can't protect friendly aircraft from surface-to-air missiles, commonly called SAMs. These missiles can travel at near hypersonic speeds and reach high into the stratosphere. They're guided by radars that can see aircraft coming from far away. To prevent SAMs from shooting down friendly aircraft, NATO would first have to take out the radars guiding them.
One of the biggest challenges we have is an opponent's air defense, because the air defense is not just one system, but normally a system of systems. So to peel that onion, as we call it, we need a variety of capabilities.
And one of those capabilities is a group of talented, potentially crazy pilots called Wild Weasels. It's a silly name, sure, but the job is no joke. Their mission is to fly ahead of the main force and take out the radars that guide SAMs to their targets.
First and last out, it's kind of what we all know that we're going to be asked to do. We're going to be the first ones in on the leading edge of the larger force package to try and get them to turn on and look at us so we can suppress that threat.
The Weasels use a specialized missile called a HARM, short for High-Speed Anti-Radiation Missile, that homes in on the radar signal, forcing it to either shut down or risk destruction. But if they can find the radar, that means the radar can find them.
Do you have the most stressful job in the world?
Biased answer, I would say yes. I'm sure others would disagree with me, but it's a very stressful job. It's one of those things where, yes, it is dangerous. It's an inherently dangerous mission set, but we are very prepared as a squadron, as an Air Force, as a whole, to take on that very challenging mission set.
With the threat of surface-to-air missiles minimized, the Weasels have opened the door for Allied fighter jets.
When the enemy's air defense is down, that gives us the air superiority to actually attack what we need to attack on the ground.
NATO allies operate more than a dozen types of fighters, supersonic jets designed to take on multiple missions at the same time, from bombing raids to dogfights to providing close air support for Allied troops on the ground. With fighters from different nations taking off from different bases on around-the-clock combat missions, this would be an extremely complicated undertaking. But it's made easier by the fact that, after decades of training together, NATO's fighter pilots can work together seamlessly.
We have basically same manuals, stronger together. That's not just a buzzword. And I believe in that when we are able to work together, get to know each other, that's strong.
To command such a counterattack would push NATO's mission planners to the max. How do you control something this complicated? The answer might surprise you, by controlling it as little as possible.
Controlling from thousands of kilometers away is not the best way to do it. Actually, training our pilots to take the decisions on the battlefield, in the air, and making them good at that is what achieves the success of the NATO air power.
After defeating hostile radars and SAM sites, and pulling off the complex art of air-to-air combat, NATO's air forces would then encounter a surprisingly simple problem: fuel. Fighters burn jet fuel at an astonishing rate, and after deep strikes or intense air-to-air combat, running out of gas is a real concern. That's why NATO allies have a fleet of aircraft designed specifically to refuel other aircraft in midair. These massive air-to-air refuelers are like flying petrol stations. They carry over 130,000 liters of jet fuel and can pump it into friendly fighters at a rate of more than 4,000 liters per minute.
So biggest advantage of us refueling them in the air on the spot is to extend their time in the air and their range. If we would drag them from A to B, for example, that's the most prominent point.
For gas-thirsty jets on their way home from a long mission, they're a sight for sore eyes. But linking up might be harder than it seems.
You have taught from the beginning of the pilot career that don't hit anything with the airplane, and now once you do air-to-air refueling, you have to hit something. But it is different way of flying, let's say so. But we're trying to provide the most stable platform that we can be. So we're flying the most predictable way. So we're matching speeds, we're pre-arranging speeds that will both fly, and then it's a lot of pre-arrangement and predictability.
This is, more or less, how NATO would defend its airspace against conventional attack. But recent years have introduced new threats that allies must account for. In Ukraine, for example, millions live under a near-constant onslaught of armed drones used by Russia to hit both civilian and military targets. These drones are slow and clumsy, but they can be deployed by the thousands. NATO allies are developing new tools to counter this threat at any scale. In the meantime, quick reaction jets are on alert 24/7 to repel any intrusions into our airspace. At the end of the day, securing the skies takes more than cutting-edge tech or even bravery. It takes a lot of practice. Ask any NATO Air Force officer what sets them apart, and they'll say,
well-trained pilots. And with 32 nations, we kind of challenge each other, which means that we are constantly getting better instead of just taking the rule book and just following it.
You kind of have to rely on your training, you rely on the preparedness and readiness that you have. I think in terms of being able to integrate with foreign partners, you definitely have an unmatched capability to do that here in Europe, just with the close proximity to them, which I think only enhances our lethality, one as a unit, but as an Air Force as well.
That wraps up this flight of the Allied Airpower podcast. We hope you enjoyed today's unique educational episode on NATO Airpower. Now you have a better sense of how NATO's air forces would defend its territory through a complex ballet of radars, both ground-based and airborne, flying petrol stations, aka our Allied tankers, carrying more than 100,000 liters of jet fuel, and of course our supersonic strike fighters who are tasked with taking down enemy air defenses and gaining air superiority. If you'd like to watch the full video, go to www.nato.int or just visit our Allied Air Command YouTube page. Lastly, because I have to, a disclaimer. The views expressed on the Allied Airpower podcast are those of the guest and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of NATO, NATO Allied Air Command, or any national government. Well, that's it for today. If you found value in today's episode, please share the show and leave us a rating so others can navigate air, space, and cyberspace with us. Explore deeper coverage anytime at ac.nato.int and send us your questions or any topics you'd like us to tackle or address. Until our next sortie, stand ready in the air, secure in cyberspace, and steady on the path to the stars.